The three suns burned high over the city of Vera Prime, casting long, sharp shadows across the marble steps of the High Council Hall. The air was dry, yet heavy, carrying the murmur of thousands of voices gathered in the square. It was not an ordinary day. Something was about to happen that most people in the city would never forget. At the center of the steps stood Cara Vera, her hands bound with silver restraints that glowed faintly. The restraints were not only metal, they were alive with a faint hum. Adjusting to her movements, Cara kept her head high, her dark hair falling over one side of her face, but her eyes did not waver. The crowd stared at her with a mixture of curiosity and fear. Some whispered, some spat on the ground. Others just watched in silence. They had heard the charge, they knew the reason for her trial, or at least they thought they did. High Chancellor Lorik, a tall, thin figure draped in silver robes, stepped forward. His voice was sharp and cold as he addressed the crowd. Cara Vera, daughter of the house of Saran, you stand accused of a crime older than the city itself, he said. You carry the blood of our greatest enemy. A wave of gasps spread through the square like wind through dry leaves. The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Cara's face stayed calm, but inside her heart pounded. She had always known her heritage was different, but she had never expected them to drag her here in front of everyone. You are half-blood, Lorik continued, his voice louder now. Your father was one of us, but your mother, he paused, his mouth curling in disgust. Your mother was of the Drakari, the Drakari. Even the sound of the name made the crowd murmur again. Stories of war, invasion, and blood filled the minds of those who listened. The Drakari were the monsters of their history, blamed for every great disaster. It did not matter that the last war had ended generations ago. Hatred was an easy thing to pass down. You are hereby banished to the wastes, Lorik declared, his voice echoing. You will leave this city before the sun set, and you will never return. The guards at her side gripped her arms, ready to lead her away, but before they moved, Cara's gaze wandered across the crowd. And that was when she saw him, a human. It was rare to see one here. Rarer still in the heart of the council square. He stood taller than most of the crowd, dressed in worn, dust-stained clothes, a dark jacket hanging loose around his shoulders. His hair was short, his jaw marked with the shadow of days without shaving. He did not join the others in their whispers or their stares. He simply watched her, his eyes steady. There was something about those eyes, calm, measuring, and almost familiar. Cara blinked, unsure why the sight of a stranger could shake her in a moment like this. The guards pulled her forward, and the crowd parted like water onto stone. Some hissed as she passed. Others turned their faces away. Children were pulled back by their parents, as if her presence alone could harm them. She kept walking, her feet moving across the stone path that led away from the council. Her shadow stretched ahead of her, long and thin, almost swallowed by the glare of the suns. At the edge of the square, she glanced back one last time. The human was still there, still watching. The moment their eyes met again, he tilted his head slightly, as if giving her a signal she could not yet understand. The guards noticed nothing. Cara was pushed forward onto the open road that led toward the wastes. Her sentence had begun. The city fell away behind her as the sound of the crowd faded into silence. The road ahead was cracked and dry, stretching toward a shimmering horizon. Beyond that horizon lay the wastes, a place of storms, beasts, and wreckage. No one came. Back from there, she had heard the stories as a child. The wastes swallowed people whole, but as the hot wind whipped at her face, Cara felt something strange. It was not fear, not exactly. It was the memory of those calm human eyes, and for reasons she could not explain, she felt that this was not the end of her story. Somehow, somewhere, something was waiting. The guards marched her to the outer gates, their armor clanking in the dry heat. They unshackled her wrists but kept their weapons ready. One of them, an older guard with scars on his face, leaned closer and muttered, "Run fast, half-blood. The wastes don't like slow meat." Then they turned and walked back toward the city, leaving her standing alone under the triple suns. Kara took her first step toward the barren land. The heat shimmered, making the horizon dance. The sand crunched under her boots. She did not look back this time, but in her mind, she could still see the human standing in the crowd, watching her with those steady eyes, and she could not shake the feeling that he would not stay in the city for long, that somehow their paths would cross again, and when they did, nothing would be the same. Asterisk gates closed behind her with a deep, echoing thud. The sound rolled through the hot air like the final beat of a drum. Kara did not turn around. She kept walking, each step taking her further from the city and deeper into the open nothing. The wastes stretched before her like a wounded world. The ground was broken and jagged, as if some giant hand had tried to crush the land long ago. Rivers of black glass cut across the sand, sharp and glittering under the suns. Old metal bones, the twisted remains of ships and machines, lay half buried in the dust. The air tasted strange here, dry but with a faint metallic bite. Every breath felt heavier than the last. The first hours were easy enough. The heat pressed down on her like a heavy blanket, but she was used to hard ground and long walks. It was the silence that unsettled her, a silence so deep that it made the sound of her own footsteps feel too loud. Once in a while, the wind would move and carry with it a faint sound, the creak of metal, the whisper of something shifting in the distance. She could not tell if it was the wind or something alive. By midday, the heat had become dangerous. Her water was already warm, and her mouth was dry after every sip. She found the remains of an old cargo hauler, its hull split wide open. The metal smelled of rust and ash. She stepped inside to escape the direct glare of the suns. The shade was cooler, but not safe. Deep inside the wreck, she heard a slow, dragging movement. Something was in there, moving in the shadows. She backed away before she could see it, knowing well enough that the wastes rewarded only caution. As night approached, the air began to change. The heat faded fast, replaced by a cold that cut straight through her thin clothes. The sky turned a deep orange before the suns vanished. Stars emerged, hundreds of them, sharp and clear. They were beautiful. But Kara knew beauty here could be a trap. The wastes came alive after dark. From somewhere far off, a low, mournful howl carried through the air, followed by another, closer this time. She needed shelter, and she needed it fast. She found it in a half-collapsed bunker, its roof dented but still holding. Inside, she could see old signs written in human script, faded but still readable. Kara had learned a few human words in her youth, enough to make out warning and restricted zone. She set her bag down and listened. The night outside was not quiet now. It was full of rustling, growling, and the sudden crash of something big moving over stone. Hours passed, and Kara stayed awake, her back against the cold wall. She thought of the human in the square, his eyes, his stillness, the way he had looked at her as if they were already connected. She told herself it was nothing, a trick of her mind in a moment of fear, and yet she could not stop wondering. Why would a human be there at all, watching a trial that was not his? Near midnight, she heard something new. Not the growl of an animal, not the howl of a storm. This was softer, the sound of metal boots crunching over sand, slow, careful, measured. The sound stopped outside her shelter. For a moment, there was only silence. Then something slid across the ground, a small metal container. It rolled to a stop at her feet. Her fingers tightened around it. The seal was human design. Inside, she found fresh water, dried fruit, and a strip of ration. Meat. She froze, her mind racing. Someone knew she was here. Someone wanted her alive. Kara stood and looked toward the doorway. The night was too dark to see clearly, but she thought she saw a tall shadow against the starlit horizon. It stood still for a long moment. Then it turned and walked away, disappearing into the blackness of the wastes. Kara stared after it, her heart beating faster than she liked. She did not know if she was being hunted or saved, but she knew one thing. She was not alone anymore. Asterisk. The second night in the wastes was colder than the first. Kara had found an abandoned shuttle hull to sleep in. Its walls bent inward from some long-ago explosion. She sat with her back against the metal, chewing the last of the ration meat left by her unseen visitor. The taste was dry and salty, but better than nothing. Still, her mind wasn't on the food. It was on the shadow she had seen the night before. Whoever it was had been close enough to see her without being seen, close enough to leave supplies and walk away without a sound. No one in the wastes did something like that for free. Kindness here was rare, and always came with a price. A faint vibration ran through the sand. It was subtle, but she felt it in her bones. Something was moving outside. Not fast, not in a rush, slow, careful steps. Her hand went to the piece of pipe she had taken from the shuttle wreck. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. The sound grew closer, then stopped. Kara's breath slowed. The entrance to the shuttle hull was just a jagged gap in the wall. Beyond it, the night was full of shadows. Then he stepped inside, a human. The same one from the trial. The firelight from her small heat stick flickered across his face, short. Dark hair, sharp eyes that seemed to take in every detail at once. Dust clung to his jacket, his boots, even the small scratches on the armor plates under his clothes. "You're wasting your food," he said, his voice calm, deep. Kara gripped the pipe tighter. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice steady but low. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he set down a small pack and sat cross-legged. "Name's Elias Ward," he said finally. "Traitor, traveler, occasional troublemaker." She didn't lower the pipe. "You were at the trial," she said. "You watched me get banished." "I did," he replied without shame. "And now you're following me," she said. "That's right," he said, almost as if it were the simplest truth in the world. Kara frowned. "Why?" Elias leaned back against the wall, pulling off one glove. "Because you're not here by accident," he said. "You're here because someone wanted you out of the way." Kara narrowed her eyes. "I think we both know who," she said. "The council," Elias replied. "But not just because of what you are. It's because of what you might find." Her grip on the pipe eased, but only slightly. "And what would that be?" she asked. He studied her for a moment, as if deciding how much to tell. "There's something in the wastes," he said. "An artifact, older than the city, older than the council's lies." Kara gave a short, bitter laugh. "You came all this way for a story?" Elias shook his head. "I came because the artifact only responds to certain blood," he said. "Your blood." The air between them felt heavier now. Kara's thoughts moved fast, too fast. She didn't like the way his words pulled at something inside her, something she had been trying to ignore since the day she learned the truth about her mother. Elias stood, his shadow stretching across the curved wall. "You can stay here and wait for the wastes to kill you," he said. "Or you can walk with me and find out why they're so afraid of you." He turned toward the entrance without waiting for an answer. Kara watched him go, her jaw tight. The smart choice would be to stay away from him. The smart choice would be to trust no one. But as his footsteps faded into the dark, she realized her legs were already moving, following. The wastes changed as they moved deeper. The sand gave way to broken plains of black stone. Each slab cracked and tilted as if the ground had frozen mid-quake. Heat shimmer rose in waves, bending the horizon into strange shapes, here and there. Jagged metal towers jutted from the earth, relics from a war neither of them had seen. Elias moved like someone who had walked these lands before. Every turn he took avoided something Kara couldn't see until it was too late. Thin patches of glass that would collapse under weight, sinkholes disguised under drifting dust, places where the air itself shimmered with poison. They spoke little at first. Elias would point, she would follow. When she asked how he knew the way, he only said, "I pay attention." He had a way of noticing things, small, quick glances at the sky, the ground, even her footing. It wasn't just skill, it was survival carved into habit on the third day. They reached what looked like the skeleton of a massive ship half buried in the stone. Its hull was scorched, melted in places. Strange marks were cut deep into its metal, not damage, but writing. Kara ran her fingers over it, feeling the cold grooves. The symbols twisted in her mind until they formed meaning. "You can read that," Elias said, watching her. She nodded slowly. "It's Druckery," she said. "It says Path of the First Blood." Elias didn't smile, but his eyes sharpened. "Then we're close," he said, that night. They camped in the shadow of the wreck. Elias repaired a small drone he carried. Using wires stripped from the ship's bones, Kara watched him work. "You're not a traitor," she said. He didn't look up. "Not anymore," he said. "Then what are you?" She pressed. "Someone who's tired of watching the wrong people win." He replied, and that was all. The next day, the storms came. It began with a faint tremor under their boots. Then the wind rose, carrying fine shards of glass that burned their skin. Elias tossed her a scarf and goggles, pulling his own into place. They ran for shelter, an outcrop of stone barely wide enough to shield them. The storm roared like a living thing, hammering the rock with a sound like 1,000 knives. Kara pressed against the wall, her heart pounding. Through the veil of flying glass, she thought she saw shapes moving in the storm, tall, thin figures. Walking against the wind, she blinked, and they were gone. When the storm passed, the land looked different. New paths had opened. Sand scoured away to reveal the edge of something massive buried in the ground. They approached slowly. It wasn't a building or a ship. It was older than both. A structure of black stone, smooth as glass, rising from the earth like the tip of an iceberg. Markings ran along its side, glowing faintly when Kara stepped near. Elias looked at her. "It's waking up for you," he said quietly. Kara's pulse quickened. "Why?" she asked. "Because it knows you," Elias said, "the way it knew the one who built it." They moved closer, the air around them humming like a living thing. Somewhere inside, the artifact waited, but so did the truth Elias hadn't told her yet. And Kara was starting to suspect that finding one might mean facing the other. The entrance to the black stone structure swallowed them in silence. Inside, the air was cooler, heavy with a faint metallic taste. Their footsteps echoed down a long corridor lined with faintly glowing symbols. Every few steps, the lights seemed to pulse, as if the walls themselves were breathing. Kara felt something strange in her chest. Not fear exactly, but a pull, like an invisible thread guiding her forward. Elias walked beside her, quiet, eyes scanning the walls and ceiling. When they reached a vast chamber, she stopped in her tracks. The room was circular, its floor marked with intricate lines that seemed to shift when she looked at them too long. In the center, a pedestal waited, and upon it rested the artifact. It was smaller than she expected. A sphere of black crystal, crisscrossed with faint silver veins. It pulsed with a slow heartbeat of light. Kara stepped closer without thinking. The lines on the floor lit up under her boots, following her every step until she stood before it. Her reflection shone in the crystal surface. But it wasn't just her face she saw. There was another, a woman with eyes like hers. Standing behind her in the reflection, her mother. Kara reached out. The crystal warmed under her fingers, and the lines on the floor flared bright. Somewhere deep inside the structure, a low rumble began. Elias stepped forward, but not to stop her, to take the sphere from her hands. She turned sharply. "You said you needed me to find it." She said. "I do," he replied, his voice calm, "but not for the reason you think." The chamber door slid open with a hiss. Figures in. Silver armor poured in. Council soldiers, their weapons already raised. Kara's breath caught. "You led them here," she said, her voice sharp. Elias shook his head. "No, they followed me," he said. "They've been hunting this longer than you've been alive." The soldiers fanned out, their leader stepping forward. "Thank you, Captain Ward," he said coldly. "You've saved us the trouble." Kara's eyes widened. "Captain, not traitor, not wanderer." Elias' jaw tightened. "You think you can keep this weapon?" he said, his voice low. "It's not a weapon," the leader snapped. "It's the key to controlling the Drakari, and we'll use it to end them forever." Kara's grip on the sphere tightened. Memories of her mother's stories came rushing back, not of war, but of peace, of a time when the Drakari and humans had fought side by side. The council had erased those stories, turned them into lies. The soldiers moved closer. Elias stepped in front of her. "I didn't bring them here for you," he said quietly. "I brought you here so you could see what they're afraid of." The leader raised his weapon. Kara looked from Elias to the soldiers, then back to the sphere in her hands. It pulsed faster now, the silver veins glowing like liquid fire. For the first time since her banishment, Kara didn't feel lost. She felt ready. The first shot cracked through the chamber. It struck the floor where Kara had stood a second earlier. Shards of black stone spraying into the air. Elias moved fast, pulling her behind one of the curved walls. The soldiers advanced, their silver armor glinting in the pulsing light of the artifact. "They want you alive, but not unharmed," Elias said, reloading his weapon with calm hands. "That's supposed to make me feel better?" Kara replied, her voice tight. "No," Elias said. "It's supposed to give you time." The artifact in her grip was warm now, almost hot. It pulsed against her palm like a second heartbeat. Every beat seemed to match her own breath. When she peeked around the wall, the glowing lines on the floor shifted, bending, twisting, forming a path under her feet. The path led straight toward the soldiers. "I can't fight them," she said. "Not like this," Elias replied. "But the artifact can." Her eyes locked on his. "You knew this all along," she said. "I guessed," he admitted. "But you had to believe it yourself." The soldiers closed in, their leader barking orders. Kara stepped out from cover. The sphere cradled in both hands. It flared bright, flooding the chamber with white light. The markings on the walls and floor blazed to life. Energy surged through the air, lifting her hair, making her skin prickle. A soldier fired, but the bolt curved in midair, bending away from her and striking the ceiling. Another tried to rush forward, only to be hurled back by an invisible force. The artifact's light spread into a dome around her and Elias. Outside the dome, the soldiers staggered, their weapons flickering and dying. Kara could feel something, not just the artifact's power, but memory. She saw flashes of her mother's life, of battles fought not to destroy, but to protect. She understood now. The artifact was never meant to control or kill. It was meant to shield, to turn the enemy's strength into their own. The leader roared and charged, blade raised. Kara raised the sphere. The blade struck the light and shattered like glass. The force flung the leader across the chamber, where he lay stunned. The dome pulsed once more. Then the light faded. The soldiers lay scattered, groaning, their weapons useless. Elias stood beside her, breathing hard. "You just made sure they'll never forget your name," he said. Kara looked down at the sphere, its glow now soft, steady. "They'll call me a traitor," she said. "They'll call you a hero," Elias replied. "Depends on who's telling the story." For the first time, Kara felt the weight of choice in her hands. She could run, or she could stay and fight. But one thing was certain. She was no longer just surviving. She was deciding what came next. By the time they stepped out of the black stone structure, the wastes were quiet. The storm had passed, leaving the land washed in the pale light of the rising suns. The air felt different, not lighter, but charged, as if the world itself knew. Something had shifted. Word traveled faster than either of them expected. In the city, whispers became rumors, and rumors became shouts. The council's story was breaking apart. Witnesses spoke of a half-blood who had faced their soldiers and walked away untouched. Some feared her, some praised her, but none could ignore her. Elias leaned against the side of his small ship, watching her from the ramp. "You don't have to decide now," he said. Kara stood a few paces away, the artifact cradled in her hands like a living thing. "I already did." she said, her voice calm. I'm not going back. Elias raised an eyebrow. You could lead them, he said. I could, she replied, but I'd rather change them from the outside. She stepped onto the ship, her boots ringing against the metal. The view from the ramp stretched across endless wastes. Somewhere beyond them lay other cities, other worlds, other truths hidden by other councils. She knew this wasn't the end of the fight. It was the first step of a much longer journey. As the ship lifted off, the wastes fell away beneath them. The suns painted the horizon gold. Elias set the course, glancing at her once. You know, he said, most people run from trouble. I'm not most people, Kara replied. The artifact pulsed softly in her lap, as if agreeing she had been banished for her blood. But now, that same blood carried a legacy that could not be erased. The council had tried to make her a warning. Instead, she had become a beginning, and somewhere deep inside, she knew the galaxy would never be the same. Asterisk.